What would you do if a stranger handed you a blank check, and when you filled in $1 million, it actually cash out?
Juice?
No thanks, I'm not thirsty.
I suppose you want big bills.
Actually, regular size would be okay.
For this clever kid, it's the ultimate dream come true, until it all turns into a wild ride of greed, deception, and danger. This is the recap of the movie Blank Check, a story where a fulfilled wish takes a dark comedic turn. This is the story of how fast a fortune can burn when a kid gets everything he wants and more than he ever bargained for.
I should have known.
Hey, I wouldn't have traded that night for anything.
The story begins with Preston Waters, an 11-year-old boy living with his parents and two older brothers, Damien and Ralph. Life at home is difficult for Preston. His older brothers constantly bother him and have even taken over his bedroom to set up their computer system for their small business. Their father, Fred, supports the older boy's venture and repeatedly urges Preston to make sacrifices for his brothers. Although Preston is unhappy with the situation, he feels powerless to change it. One day, Preston attends the birthday party of his friend Butch at Cliffside Fun Park. Unlike his friends, Preston can only afford the cheaper, child-friendly rides because his father had given him only $10. His friends laugh at him for having so little money. Although Preston's family is not poor, his father is extremely tight-fisted and he believes in teaching his children to save money. The next morning, Damien and Ralph leave for a baseball game. Preston wants to join them but does not have enough money to buy a ticket. So, his father explains the importance of saving and insists that Preston must earn his own spending money. But Preston argues that he cannot save because he does not have a job. Later on, his mother gives him an envelope containing his grandmother's early birthday gift. Inside, Preston finds a blank check, but since no amount is written on it, he assumes it is worthless. However, his father fills in an amount, $11. Then he goes on to tell Preston that this money can grow into $1 million over time through proper saving and interest. Curious about this, Preston calculates how long it would take for his $11 to grow into $1 million. To his disappointment, he learns it would take over 300,000 years. He is now totally discouraged, believing he will never become wealthy in life. Still, he makes a list of wishes, including having his own home and regaining his bedroom from his brothers. In the meantime, somewhere around town, an escaped convict named Carl Quigley has just broken out of prison during a stormy night and he quickly goes to an abandoned building where he had previously hidden a briefcase containing $1 million. The following day, Carl visits a bank, where he meets Biederman, the bank's president and his former money laundering partner. Carl proposes that Biederman helps him to launder the money to avoid attracting the attention of the federal agents. Although he was initially hesitant, Biederman ultimately agrees when Carl threatens his family. Carl then tells him to give the money to a man named Juice the following day. Meanwhile, Preston rides his bicycle to the same bank to cash his check. However, the bank teller, who is a kind woman named Shay, informs him that the account minimum is $200. Disappointed, Preston leaves with his check. But as he gets on his bicycle, Butch snatches the check from him and rides away. But Preston gives chase and he accidentally collides with Carl's reversing car, which crushes his bicycle. Carl steps down from his car and in an attempt to avoid drawing attention as a police car approaches, hurriedly writes a blank check and hands it to Preston as he quickly flees the scene. Unaware of what he has just received, Preston puts it in his pocket and returns back. At home, Preston returns with his damaged bicycle and instead of sympathy, his father scolds him for being careless and grounds him for not taking better care of his belongings. Totally upset at how the scenario has unfolded, Preston chooses not to share the earlier encounter involving the blank check. When he is alone in his room, he uses his computer to fill in the amount of $1 million on the check and writes a random name as the recipient. The next day, Preston visits the bank to cash the check. But due to the unusually large amount, the teller sends him to Biederman. When he sees Carl's signature on the check, Biederman mistakenly assumes Preston is Juice, the contact that Carl had mentioned. Believing this is part of Carl's plan, Biederman promptly fills Preston's backpack with $1 million in cash and allows him to leave. On his way out, Preston crosses paths with the real Juice, but neither pays much attention to the other. Juice then proceeds to Biederman's office to collect the money, only for Biederman to realize his mistake. They quickly rush out to find Preston, but the boy is already gone. At home, Preston immediately begins browsing houses for sale online. He quickly finds one he likes and contacts a real estate agent, using his computer's robotic voice to disguise his identity. He offers $300,000 to secure the house. When he is asked for the buyer's name, Preston invents the alias Macintosh. Excited by his new fortune, he feels his dream of living independently has finally come true. Meanwhile, Carl discovers what has happened and is furious. At first, he blames Biederman for the mistake, but then recalls the blank check he had hastily handed to Preston the day before. Now determined to find the kid, Carl, Biederman, and Juice set out to search places typically visited by children who have spare money. However, Preston, who has now fully embraced his newfound wealth, books a limousine service and arranges for the driver, Henry, to pick him up. When Henry arrives, he is initially skeptical but immediately changes his tone once Preston pays him extra. Preston explains that the limousine belongs to his wealthy boss, Macintosh, as the two then embark on an extravagant shopping spree across the city, purchasing toys, clothes, video games, and other luxuries, quickly filling his new home with expensive goods. As a token of appreciation, Preston gives Henry an expensive watch. Later on, Preston runs into Shay on the street and informs her that he will soon be depositing over $200 in his account. After their brief meeting, Shay is seen speaking to an unknown man. That is when it is revealed that she is actually an undercover FBI agent investigating money laundering activities within the bank. The following morning, when Fred prepares to leave for work, he finds his driveway blocked by several delivery trucks unloading goods into the neighboring house. Furious, Fred approaches them to clear a path, and he is shocked to see Preston managing the workers and giving them orders. So, Preston explains that he now works for Macintosh and instructs the workers to clear the path for his father, an order which is quickly obeyed, and in the end, he is left stunned by his son's apparent authority. As the moving process comes to an end, Preston's new home is fully transformed, complete with racetracks, a video game system, his own office, and even a personal water park. Preston and Henry continue to enjoy their days together as they indulge themselves in the luxuries Preston's newfound wealth provides. News of the mysterious millionaire, Macintosh, quickly spreads throughout the neighborhood, eventually reaching Shay. Curious about Macintosh's extravagant spending, Shay decides to visit his residence to investigate his source of income. When she arrives at the luxurious mansion, she finds Preston instead of the supposed millionaire. Preston quickly explains that Macintosh has a packed schedule and won't be able to meet anyone. To divert her attention, Preston boldly invites Shay to a business dinner, an offer to which she eventually agrees to when Preston introduces himself as Macintosh's financial manager. In the meantime, despite knowing about Preston's association with Macintosh, his father refuses to let him go out at night. But Preston subtly convinces him by implying that Macintosh could offer him valuable career opportunities. Tempted by the potential benefits, Fred allows his son to proceed with his night outing. That night, Preston takes Shay to a lavish dinner and gives her an expensive necklace, claiming it is a token from Macintosh. Throughout the evening, he continues asking her personal questions, pretending to act on behalf of his imaginary boss. Their dinner concludes with a visit to a fountain, where they spend more time together. Meanwhile, Carl and his associates have successfully tracked him there, and when Preston spots them, he quickly hurries Shay to run to the car, and the two escape before Carl's group could reach them. Before parting ways that night, Preston invites Shay to Macintosh's upcoming birthday party. Intrigued by this, she agrees to attend, hoping to finally meet the elusive millionaire. In the preparation for the party, Preston hires a party planner to organize the grand event. Although the planner charges him $10,000 extra, she eventually decides to cut corners and pocket most of the money, only arranging a simple dinner instead of the extravagant celebration Preston envisioned. The next day, Preston finds out that Henry is busy with his own commitment, and this leaves him alone at home. Feeling lonely, Preston rides his bicycle to the nearby park, where he watches other children playing together, and the moment makes him reflect on the life he had before he stumbled on the money. Moments later, Carl and his crew also arrive at the same park and spot Preston. Suddenly, a high-speed chase begins as Preston desperately tries to cycle away. Despite their best efforts, Carl's car becomes stuck on top of other parked vehicles, forcing them to abandon the pursuit. Totally frustrated, Biederman concludes that stealing another $1 million would be easier than trying to capture Preston. The group then chose to shift their strategy. So, they track down Preston's friend Butch instead, kidnap him, and pressure him into revealing Preston's name and home address after holding him from the edge of the roof of a building. That evening, Preston's birthday party proceeds as planned, though the event is far less grand than he had hoped. Still, Preston uses his newfound influence to order his older brothers to work for him during the party. When his brothers eventually see Shay, they laugh at Preston as they tell him that she is a gold digger who is only interested in Preston because of his money. Saddened by this, Preston later asks Henry if some people only pretend to care about others because of their wealth. Coincidentally, Henry admits that some of his own friends stay close to him for that same reason, and this eventually deepens Preston's growing sadness. While the extravagant birthday party continues, Shay and her FBI team uncover troubling information as they find that Macintosh, the supposed millionaire, has no digital footprint, birth records, or financial history. So, they conclude that he must be a criminal hiding behind a fake identity, and they make plans to arrest him that very night. Back at the party, the event manager approaches Preston with a bill totaling $100,000. Shocked by the estimate, Preston rushes to his computer to check his remaining balance. To his disappointment, he finds that he has only $332 left after all his spendings. While Preston is still in his room, his father enters and begins speaking to the figure sitting in Macintosh's chair, unaware that it's actually his son. Thinking he's finally meeting the elusive millionaire, Fred opens up about the pressures he had put on Preston and his regret for not being more understanding to his son. The heartfelt confession moves Preston, who silently listens from behind the chair. By the time he stands to respond, his father has already left. When Preston goes outside to ask about Henry's whereabouts so he can ask him for some friendly advice, he is told that he has disappeared. Believing everyone has now abandoned him, and still stung by earlier remarks about Shay being a gold digger, Preston decides to shut down the party. So, he informs the event manager that Macintosh is missing and that he won't be paying the bill. Furious at the news, she makes a scene and forces all the guests to leave. Now alone in the house, Preston hears the doorbell ring. Expecting to see Henry, he opens the door, only to be met by Carl and his men. Carl immediately demands for the money, but Preston tells him that he had already spent the entire sum. Skeptical that a child could burn through $1 million in 6 days, Carl refuses to believe him and continues to threaten the boy. That was when Biederman pulled Carl aside and proposed that he could assume the identity of Macintosh and take over the lavish life Preston had created. As they plot their next move, Preston seizes the opportunity and runs out of the room. A chaotic chase ensues, but Preston, who now knows the full layout of the house already, uses the elaborate features of his mansion to outmaneuver them. But despite his efforts, Carl eventually captures him, and just then, the FBI bursts in with their weapons drawn and orders everyone to freeze. The trio is arrested for fraud, money laundering, and theft. In a last-ditch attempt to salvage something, Carl announces he is Macintosh, hoping to keep at least the mansion for himself. But his declaration seals his fate, as it only confirms what the FBI had suspected, and he's taken away in handcuffs. In the end, Shay tells Preston that she is an undercover FBI agent all along. Believing this means they can't be together, he prepares to say goodbye, only for Shay to surprise him with a kiss and tell him to call her in 10 years. Moments later, Preston walks outside and finds Henry waiting for him. Henry then tells him that he had only stepped out to get ice cream for the party. When he finally realizes that their time together is over, the two share a heartfelt goodbye. Then, in the final scene of the movie, Preston returns home to celebrate the rest of his birthday, this time with the people who truly matter, his family. And that is the recap of the movie, Blank Cheque. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more movie recaps like this on this channel, leave a comment for us and also drop a like on the video. Thanks for watching.